let's go to the other side of the world for a second. Sophie, you studied economics at Cambridge, but your major was in Asian economies. And you were able to raise money from the Hawaii brothers to help support STX. So where does Asia fit into your thinking? Where, in terms, I guess, in a macro sense, in terms of, are you going to be making movies that will appeal to that market? How big is that market? What focus will STX have on the international?
For us, when we had put these distribution agreements in place, money right now is not the issue. The question for me always was, how do you get the smartest, most strategic money around the table? We were initially backed, we were incubated by a private equity firm called TPG. TPG has $65 billion of assets under management. It's never about the money, it's about where is entertainment going? Where is the future of movie making going? And when you look at the statistics and realize that China will be the largest consumers of entertainment in the world next year, there was actually a period earlier this year where the Chinese box office actually exceeded that of America for the first time ever. So we approached the largest and oldest private equity firm in China called Hony Capital as a way of trying to get a sense of the marketplace over there. So they invested in us, equity in us, which as part of a mix of people, including a bunch of banks and other guys, closed our equity funding. But that gave us a really interesting platform to see, okay, how do you actually interact with these guys? It's a different world. It's a global world now. Where are we going next? Adam Fogelson, who, as I mentioned, runs our film division, actually came into my office and said, look, I ran Universal for years to tremendous success, but I'm seeing an unbelievable number of fabulous stories with big movie stars, bankable stars, but stories that really mean something. You know, I'd like some more money to actually go and make all of those movies. At which point it's my job to say, look, I'm here to weaponize the talent. I'm here to weaponize really good producers. I'm here to weaponize my staff. I'm here to weaponize big movie stars. Let's go and figure out what's going on in China. And actually went and raised a bunch of slate financing from the largest privately owned entertainment conglomerate in China called Huayi, which closed at the beginning of last month. So for me, that's a really, although they have no say over our content, for us, they've been unbelievably brilliant partners. It's been a complete joy to work with them. And the person who's able to actually crack the global marketplace is in a really interesting position. I know there's a lot of discussion of, well, does it need to be a Chinese-focused movie? No, is the very clear answer. But wouldn't it be fantastic to actually work with your partners and say, how do I make this a more forward-thinking movie, while protecting the story, while protecting the talent, but actually trying to figure out a way to make something that's less introverted and less just based in the States.
Right, and couldn't one contend that the major studios are trying to do that with these huge tentpoles? That's their attempt to crack the Chinese market. And is it working?
The irony is, those tentpole movies really work. Avatar really worked. For them, that was a fantastic move. It was a huge spend, but it actually worked.
Right.
Part of the question with that, though, is you have no real say over what you're doing in China. There are 4 deals that have been closed with the Chinese. I think we talked about this recently.
And you closed one of them.
Well, we actually closed 2. So if there are if there are 4 major deals, one was AMC buying Wanda buying AMC, which is the biggest theatre chain here. One was Hunan TV with Lionsgate. And then there was Hony into us, and there was Huayi into us. They are desperate to try and understand Hollywood. They're desperate to try and interface with you guys. They're desperate to try and learn, as are we. This isn't about imposing self-culture. This is about how do we actually work with one another in a way that is a collaboration as opposed to segregating the two and trying to make it work in separate markets.
Adrian, do you feel the same? What are your thoughts about China as a banker?
It's interesting to hear that. I mean, and that's obviously at a very high level. I mean, the producers that we've dealt with have really, you know, tried to crack the Chinese sort of question so many times for so long. And these are small independent producers. So for an individual producer to try and, make a film that somehow, opens that door is tough. It's not impossible, but it's very tough. We've been involved with one film that got some Chinese equity, but up until the moment the money hit the account, and the producers had no idea whether that money was real or whether it was going to show up in time, and we were all sort of acting on faith, and it came through. But I think for every one of those stories, there's a lot where, I know producers who have sort of ventured off to China and see you in 6 months, and they come back with their tails between their legs, and they're making.
Send them my way.
I'm happy to.
And Hal, have you
get a
had
lot of
any
phone calls
experience?
after this? But so it's a mixed bag. But
Right.
I think the more understanding of that market, hopefully the easier it's going to get. My sort of feeling is that it tends to be a bit of a one-way relationship at the moment.
Right.
And even with co-production treaties between the UK and China, for example, which is very recent. China holds all the cards. There's a gray area in that legislation that says if we don't like the film, it's not going to qualify.
Well, I always, when I first met Sophie, I thought one of the interesting things that STX did was they basically went to the TPG of China, which was Honey, and used them as an entree into that complicated.
Which was a fabulous entree. It is such a complex place to try and understand that unless you actually devote yourself to spending time there and understanding the guys involved, it is very, very, very difficult. There's a real difference between closing and funding deals, but it is not unworkable.
Right. And Hal, have you had any experience?
Yeah, I've had a bit of experience. I agree with both Adrian and Sophie. It's a very difficult place to navigate, and I've spent a lot of time talking to a number of different investment groups and producers and investors out of China and Asia. And what I found was there's a lot of talk, but it's very difficult to close a transaction. I think over time, as they get used to more of the Western style of the way we do business, and we get more used to the way they do business, I think that that gap will close and more deals will happen. But I think right now it's still very difficult to get things done.
Do you see, and I guess this is to a few of you, do you see that China might go the same way as let's say France or Germany, where yes, there are English-speaking content that will work very well, but they do have every year they have their own indigenous product that is wildly successful. I mean, Jonathan, when you sell to France on a movie, so when you try to sell a movie to France, you're competing against distributors that are buying French films.
Absolutely. With China, they've got a pretty long history of making films. Their local movies outperform U.S. movies on a dollar-for-dollar yearly basis, and I don't think that's going to change. But the good news is they're building more theaters every day in China, so the bucket's getting bigger.